So today, we are finishing up our series on finding your path, and today is a discussion day. So I hope you brought your insights, your questions, your comments, because I'm going to speak briefly. This is not an opportunity to laugh. And then we're going to have a discussion. So what have we done so far? Well, the first talk, we talked about the elements of finding your path, and I suggested that there were several building blocks that we can use as we build our spiritual foundation. They are wisdom, silence or reflective, some sort of contemplative practice, action, ritual. And today I want to talk briefly before our discussion about the fifth one, which was community. That's the title of my talk, is Walking Each Other Home, because really that's what we're doing. The title is from Ram Dass, who just passed away recently, but he said, we are all just walking each other home. Isn't that a great image? We are all just walking each other home. So home, obviously, I think he meant we are all walking each other back to the divine. It's in ourselves. So yes, it's an inside job. It really is. But one of the ways we do it, one of the ways we find the holy is not only in our contemplative practices, it's also in community. It's also in relationship. In those moments of connection, we see the divine in each other, and we also awaken to it in ourselves. I think it was Henri Nouwen who said that the spiritual life does not bring you away from life, it leads you deeper into it. And that's where we find it. We find the holy in our connections with each other. It makes our lives richer. It makes our awakening deeper. Martin Luther King wrote about these connections that bind us. What he said was, all men and women are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. Thich Nhat Hanh calls this the notion of interbeing, and we've all heard about that, right? He has this exercise where he holds up a piece of paper and he says, what do you see in this piece of paper? Aha, I have one here. What do you see in this piece of paper? What do you see in this piece of paper?
White.
White, yes, but what else do you see? You see sunlight. You see a tree. You see the men and women who harvested that tree, who milled this paper, who watered the tree, who brought it to market, who made this paper. Without any one of them, we would not have this. So the tree and the sunlight and the man and the water, they all inter-are, to use his way of thinking. And the same is true for us. We think we're so individual. We're just, what, like individual cowboys? Isn't that our tradition? We just inter-are. We need to be in the heart space where we know that we are so profoundly connected, that what you do affects me and vice versa. We just all inter-are. It makes our world a richer and a kinder place. Being in community, being in this community, being in the other communities we create, gives us opportunities every day to build those qualities that bring out the best in us, right? I mean, I can sit on top of a mountaintop and I can be just as holy as I can possibly be. And then, when does the rubber hit the road? When I go down the path and I find people who make me mad. When something happens at home. Catherine, I'm not talking about you. When things, well, no, Catherine, one of my favorite stories with Catherine, I was just having an absolute aneurysm one day about something, and Catherine looks at me and says, Mom, find your chi. Oh, she did. She did.
That from me.
Yeah, and she was so right. It was like, it's in there, so maybe in the next room. I need to go get it. I'll be right back. And I'll have my chi. It's when we rub up against those things that irritate us, those things we don't understand, those things that challenge us. That's what brings out the holy in us. That's what makes us dig deep and find what is there and bring it to the surface and use it for our greater awakening. Compassion and forgiveness and love. Okay, so I'm almost finished. In what ways does community, oh my God, in what ways does community make us stronger? First, we look for a community that expands us. We look for a community that brings out the best in us, that stretches us. We do not look for a community that insulates or protects us, that hunkers down with us. As I was researching this, I came across an article about religious communities, and I think they were actually talking about churches. And the author was lamenting that too often churches today look like communities created for protection. Everybody who looks like me is in here. Okay, if you don't look like me, if you don't believe like me, I'm sorry, there's just not room. Because we're in here and we're safe. Are you one of us? Do you belong here? That is not a healthy community. One of the hallmarks of a loving and healthy community is one that does not jump to define the other. That is a challenge, because all of us have our lists of who is the other. We are heading into, and we are in, a potentially very divisive time, right? Politically, culturally, as we go through this time, we are challenged to think, how do we define the other? What conclusions do we jump to? What people do we exclude from community because we've decided they are not like us? So many times we are quick to slap on that designation. Politics, skin color, race, where you grew up, where you live. Let's not be too quick to define that other. One of the questions it might be wise to ask ourselves is, what for you turns someone into the other? And what is the result of that? What happens when you do that? What do you lose? It's so easy to make those lists. We need to be aware and cautious of creating community that is nothing but an extension of everybody in it. People who think like me, look like me, believe like me. That's very easy, but it doesn't stretch us. Healthy community also encourages us to remain flexible, to remain curious, with a tolerance for ambiguity, a tolerance for flexibility. We are really good at that, because when we walk in, we don't know how this service is going to unfold. Today, actually, it's going to be a little bit different. So, a tolerance for being open to what is next. Next, we build communities that accept and celebrate us, even when we are different, even when we are challenging, even when we have the courage to be ourselves, whether we're wacky or strange or whatever. We are celebrated in our communities. And we know that our communities see us as beloved and worthy, no matter how we show up. Sometimes you'll see communities, especially faith communities, where when people are depressed or something bad is happening, they stay away because I don't want to bring that energy. I don't want people to see me in this weakened state. That's when you need to come, because that's when we enfold you. That's when we uplift you. That's when we say you are beloved and you are worthy, no matter how you are showing up. If you show up in your Sunday best, if you show up in your pajamas, don't care. I'm not advocating that. But it's a possibility. I know, no, we're not telling pajama stories. That is okay. We celebrate folks no matter how they show up. And we communicate to them that they are beloved. Author Brené Brown did a wonderful TED Talk on vulnerability. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but if you have the chance, watch it. Because one of the things community does is it enables us, it permits us to be vulnerable, which is such a courageous thing. You know, her research, she initially wanted to do research on how people connect, and so she started doing all this research on how people connect, and what she got back was there's so many ways we fail to connect. And that turned into her research. The many ways we feel that we are unworthy. We feel that we're not enough. We feel that who could love me with me being as I am? Well, a lot of people can, and all people should. She called vulnerability the greatest mark of courage, because it's being authentic. It's showing up as you are and knowing people will believe you as you are and listen to you as you are and love you just as you are. That is the sine qua non of connection. So what I wanted to do today is just say a few words about community, about strong community, about what communities do to help us on our spiritual path. Because we have to do it individually, but it would be so hard to do if we couldn't also do it together. I find that. Which is one reason we keep coming back. To be renewed, to be reminded, to be held, and to be sent out again. To just be the lights that we are. Author Wayne Mueller wrote, "We are called to be strong companions and clear mirrors to one another." Isn't that beautiful? Strong companions and clear mirrors to one another. to seek those who reflect with compassion and a keen eye how we are doing, whether we seem centered or off course. We need the nourishing company of others to create the circle needed for growth, freedom, and healing. And that's what communities do. And that's what we do for each other. And we're very glad and we're very lucky that we do. Okay, so time for discussion. So what have we talked about? We've talked about the elements of your spiritual foundation. We've talked about whether you stick with your tradition that you grew up in or one that you find, or whether you adopt elements from many different traditions, which is what we tend to do here. And then we talked about doubt. We talked about the strength of doubt. We talked about how your spiritual journey is fueled by your questions. So several times during this month, I have invited you to think about different things. What are the elements of your spiritual journey? Your doubts. How do they fuel you as you continue to unfold? Where do you find the holy? What brings you closer? What pulls you away? Okay, I'm opening it up to the floor. We have a mic runner even. Ooh. All right. So let's just start. Did anybody have any thoughts that stuck with them over this series about how you chart your spiritual path, given that everybody in this room, probably nobody in this room, grew up in an interspiritual community? I am guessing that most folks grew up in more traditional communities. So what brought you here? Catherine, yes.
Well, musically wise, because I sing, I like all those old hymns.
You do, yes.
And I will keep loving and listening to those old hymns. But then
Okay, so it's music. So music is where Catherine finds the holy. You're exactly right. Any other thoughts? Tim?
Well, I'm going to change it from music because I'm not musically inclined. But I found it interesting, and I can't even remember which one it was, the doubt discussion or talk. And I thought about it, and it, yeah, I doubt this, I doubt that, I doubt the other, but at the same time, kind of why I'm here is I know there's something. That's kind of the fact that's there that won't change. I will never doubt that. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And all these others, I shouldn't say these others, all the other paths I've taken or read about or whatever, I sit back and say, I'm not sure about that. But it's just not mine. It very well can be yours or yours or yours. It's just not mine. And that's fine. So I don't know, I struggled with that doubt piece.
Mm-hmm.
You said the doubt piece was more, it's just part of it.
Yeah.
But I still think I know there's something there. I just can't describe what it is. So I'm just struggling with the doubt piece.
When I left, I started off as an Episcopal, and then I went, and I was a Methodist for a while, and then I went to a New Thought community for a while. And the reason I did is because I knew what I called it a harmonic. I said I was searching for that one true note, and I called it a harmonic, which is all I know about music, which runs through all of life. Yeah, Catherine's going to teach me more. Because I knew and it's the same thing you're talking about. There is that pulse of the holy, there is that energy of the holy that runs through everything. And the question was, where do you find it? So how do you find it? How do you bring it home? How do you go home to it? So what I'm finding now as I continue to go, it's so funny because sometimes, I've been giving talks since, 2014, and I'll say, well, I'm really busy this week, so I'm going to go dig up an old talk and give the same talk again. Who will notice? Every time it's a different talk because I'm not the same person. Even if I take it out, I can't give that. That's not what I think anymore. So it's a brand new thing because I have changed. So what that means for me is that I can find truth in different traditions, and it may be a tradition or a ritual or a practice that was not one that I would use 5 years ago. But it has meaning to me now because we change and we grow, and the Holy speaks to us in different ways. The Holy's reflection, as Mirabai Starr puts it, appears to us in different ways. And one of the joys that we have, given all the information we have and the tools we have, is we have so many options to see it if we just remain open to us. If we just said yes. Anthony de Mello said, he was a Jesuit priest, he said, peace is only found in yes. I love that. Peace is only found in yes. When we just say yes to what is in front of us and move through it, either ourselves or in community, and figure out how to use it for our greater awakening. And these spiritual tools can do that. Okay, enough for me. What else? Marie?
Well, it's something pretty cool. Oh. Well, two things. One, what kind of started me is, I always, same as Tim, like the it kind of thing, and I was raised Catholic. And the last time I went into confession, and the priest was like, well, this isn't a cafeteria style religion. You can't pick and choose what you want to believe. I'm like, no, I used a word that I probably shouldn't. I'm like, the hell I can't. And that was the end of that. But it really wasn't. I mean, I find that as I've come here, like I've gotten a deeper understanding of my own tradition that I was raised in, that I never had, that was so rote growing up, like say this, do this, kneel here, do this,
Yeah.
that I never really actually understood, like the deeper meaning of it. And now I'm starting to understand the deeper meaning
Yeah.
of it, because it was like all the stuff had to be kind of pulled away from it, But
Yeah, and you had to change till you could see
and I
it.
had to change too, so I could see it and not be so. But the best thing about here and the path was this week when I was having a little bit of a meltdown and acting like a freak, was the children, my boys, Timothy and Stephen. They were so helpful, and they said stuff to me that, was very spiritually mature, and like they helped me to task, and I was like, okay, I'm not there yet, but and I even said to them,
Yeah.
you hold it until I can get there. But I was really impressed with the two of you, sweetheart, because they just, having been raised in a different path than
Yeah.
like the traditional, I was really impressed, and I was so grateful that they. Like sometimes it's like, fine, use my words against me. But it was great,
Yeah.
because
They're listening.
They were listening, and they
Yeah.
walked the talk when I couldn't, when I wasn't there. So
Yeah.
it was nice. Thanks.
That's excellent. Thank you, Timothy.
So community is one of the biggest deals for me. I was having this conversation with Tom at Chicago's Friday night about how at the age of 12, when I figured out that all the stuff I'd been taught just didn't work for me, I kind of became spiritually dead for so many years. And then my mind started churning, and I started figuring out some things and thinking about some things. And by the time I got to Unity Church for the first time, I kind of had a little bit of a belief system figured out, but then to be surrounded by a whole church full of people that were kind of believing sort of the same things that I was believing was so validating. And it gave me the courage to go on with my quest. And I think without a community, I might not have done that.
Yeah.
And so then every Sunday morning I wake up and I think, oh goody, I get to go to One World today, because coming here not only feels good, but it just helps keep me focused, and it helps keep me searching and growing. So community is just a huge deal for me.
Yeah, but you're right, it does affirm for us. I mean, it gives us a place to ask the questions and to know that other people are asking the questions too.
No.
No, it's for me. Don't worry, honey, we can, I can put you on. So many of the Christian, sects, or whatever you want to call it, they talk about witnessing to others. Well, guys, you can talk and talk and talk all you want. I'm here because people witness to me through their behavior. They never said one word about religion or spirituality or any of that, but they were focused on attending to Sydney's needs. And I've never seen that consistently. Like, I've seen a example over here, and then, but not, this was a whole bunch of people. And I was going, oh my God, what are these people doing? Where's the magic, serum or whatever? So, anyway, my couple weeks later, my therapist said, you really, I hear you're, yearning for a greater community. Why don't you, do something spiritually? Because I really had stopped doing it once my kids had grown and blah, blah, blah. I kept saying to myself, I'll wait until the grandkids, come along and their parents start taking them, to synagogue or whatever. So, so she kind of got me thinking. And there's a lot of places I can't go because I prefer questions that do not have answers to answers that cannot be questioned. Wait, I mean.
That's a great way of putting it.
And I
Yeah.
read that somewhere. I will not take, I will not
We were
take-
with you until you said that.
But anyway, so I just wanted to share that with all of you, that what makes you tick shows and brought me here, and I'm so grateful that I met all of you and that I'm here.
Well, thank you. We're glad you're here. Okay, grab it to Ellen.
I'm sorry, honey. I knew that.
I think you're reminding me. Because I was just thinking, I grew up Episcopal with Melanie, obviously. And the stress was on what you have to believe. The step of how you have to show up every day and who you have to be and how that's reflected in boots on the ground behavior never, to my mind, was part of the program. And I started coming here because it was very small and I wanted to support Mel. I never miss it. I don't care if she's here or not, sorry. But honestly, that for me is, it has changed my thinking every morning of how I want to show up every day. Not what I believe, because that's part of the program too, but how I want to be with my family, with my friends, with my community, with total strangers. And that's been a huge impact for me.
Yeah. Maria.
I'm with Judy on the sense of community. Never have I been part of a community where culturally so different from me, but also so much the same. How they're as broken as I am and as put together as I am. You know, where that sense of belonging, which is very important to me, exists. Coming in with non-judgment and just pure love. I stepped away for a minute, realized, ooh, that's not the space I want to be in, and I knew where I needed to be. And one thing that I've described this community as when I come on a Sunday or when we're together is that I step into this bubble of love. I feel that, right? And I challenge, if there's anybody here who doesn't love me, please hold on to that secret, because I do. I really feel that sense of love that we all have for one another. And it's what keeps me coming back. It's stepping into that love. It's an amazing power.
When you were talking about the other, that brought a phrase that I heard one time that has helped to guide my life of those things, and that is to make yourself right, you have to make someone else wrong. And that's really helped me a lot in looking at myself. I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have some church schools, for instance.
Yes, some do.
Well, I went to a church that had a lot of instances of gave me a headache. Yeah, and they read the dead. Just read the church.
So you're just happy there's no resources?
Plus it's cold. Plus, when I was in high school, I stopped singing. I confess. When I was in high school, throughout my 20s, I went through a phase where I couldn't sing. Well, I did sing, but I wasn't feeling it, you know? Huh?
Finish that page?
I'm still on it. I don't know what it is, but I used to sing around the house all the time, a lot. And all of a sudden, people just started jumping in front of me, but not like like going away.
You know, it's hard, Catherine. Sometimes we all go through dark times. And sometimes the things that give us joy in life, for some reason, no longer do. And so it's a good question. What do we do when we reach for those things that gave us joy and now they seem kind of dry and they seem to have lost all their juice? That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
I still like to listen to people sing.
Yeah, I know you do. Well, that's how you find the holy, honey. You find it in music.
You're good, but you're not that good.
Yep. Now, Catherine loves music, and that's where Catherine loves sacred music, and that's where she finds the holy. But, so, yeah, I think we all go through moments like that. But even with the incense, you know, that's how some people find the holy. People have different rituals, and sometimes it's a good thing to be a little flexible and open to that. We see how other people find the holy and the rituals that mean something to them. But, you know, it's interesting. One of the things about community and one of the things about feeling love is, as you were talking, I was wondering what kind of powers that? You know, because we do come here and we do feel loved, and we should go everywhere and feel loved, but we don't. So it's almost like being in a spiritual community, you give yourself permission to live as you should always live. And we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable and to kind of put down our face and show our true face. And so I guess the question is, what do we have to do to be able to do that? And why can't we do it in other places? You know what I mean?
I can tell you one way to do it in other places, but I mean, when it's being afraid. I mean, so you've been told by things. You know, mom told you not to blurt out, so-and-so is fat, right? I mean, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, they just, you know. My oldest grandchild's 7, and she still will just, this is how it is.
Oh, yeah.
And it is. She's not talking about something that we've made up. She is talking about reality. So little by little, our culture tells you, shut up. You can't say those things. And little by little, we learn that we can't really show up truthfully as we are because somebody is going to really, like, judge us. I mean, I can cuss like a sailor. And some of my friends are like, but that has nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with what's in here.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I really want to say it's fear.
Well, some of it is fear. Yeah, some of it is.
And everybody else around us is afraid.
All right.
And that covers up love.
One of the things we talked about in our very first talk was the building blocks of how we build our spiritual foundation. And one of the things I talked about was wisdom. And I invited you to think about where you find your wisdom. What are your thoughts on that? I know where I find mine. I do a lot of reading. I love the Christian mystics. I love, yeah.
I want to comment on the love part.
Yeah.
I think that when you go in certain places that you don't feel the love, it's because it's sort of like a relationship. When you're in a relationship, the way to love someone is to allow them to be who they are and support their path. When you are in a controlled environment where you're forced to believe something instead of allowed to believe anything, I think it changes how you feel. And you don't feel love when you're forced to do what
Right.
you're expected to do there.
You don't feel acceptance.
Right.
That's kind of what she was saying.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
That's my thought on that.
No, I think, yeah. I think you're right when you're in a group just because of what you profess to believe. And you can't really talk about or question your questions because you don't feel safe doing so. And I've met people in communities like that. And I'm not, you know, this is not all about this community because I want to also talk about individual spiritual building blocks. But I've had friends who grew up in different, particularly faith-based communities, and the minute they started to question, they were basically booted out. So that is a scary thing.
Lucky for them.
Well, it did turn out that way, but it's a very traumatic thing because when you get booted out, sometimes you lose your family, you lose all you have. So, when you are forced to leave that particular tribe. So yeah, it's a very scary transition. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it did turn out good for them because they continued asking their questions and they continued to go where the Holy was leading them, which they may not have been able to do before. So, yeah. Oh, yes, Michael.
So, something especially with this community that I think I experience on a daily level is I see the you in me and you see me in you. What is it, namaste?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that you feel here with every single soul. Well, every single fragment of soul. There was this short story I read the other day. I think there's also a video of it. It's called The A. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. And it's by anonymous. It's by someone random. But it's this really cool thing about this person that's just died, and they went into a strange place with a strange person that they met. And the moral of it and the whole theme of it is they're touched to find out that every single person that they ever met is a part of them. Every single person they will ever meet is a part of them. And it goes on to reveal that the person that they're talking to is God, and that God is their parent, and caring for them in this egg that is the universe, and that they are destined to live every single human life until they're ready to become a God themselves. And so I just thought that was beautiful, and something I feel that every person here is on the journey to becoming. And it's something I also feel that every single person, the good and the bad, the Hitlers, the people that Hitler hurt, they're all on this journey to become something greater than the sum of their parts. It's just something I feel here that everyone understands on a deeper level where other places might not.
Yeah.
As of yet. And so that's my 2 cents.
That sounds like a wonderful story. Yes, Mutu.
I hope you cannot understand me, my accent and all that.
Yes.
I don't have to say about the community here, because in fact, this is the 4th week in succession that we started 4 weeks ago. And the very fact that we are coming is proof that there's something in this community. And of course, we could go to so many other places, there are lots of other groups on Indians, and there are lots of yoga groups and all those things. And we got temples where we go also. I wanted to talk about wisdom part, what you said. You're all familiar at least with the name, Bhagavad Gita. But what it says is there are something like this. There are 4 paths, and like water falls from anywhere, but ultimately it goes to sea. So wherever it falls, it ultimately goes to sea. So whichever path you follow, you ultimately reach the Supreme. That's what it is. And for practical purposes, you can the ritual part, that's part of it. Is in a way, you keep doing your duty with the devotion, then that will lead you there. And the path of love is same as devotion. That's what we are taught even as a child. We simply accept what our parents say, and then we show our devotion to God in some form, in a ritualistic way. And by offering the food that we take, offering it to God first, and then get God's blessing and we take it. These are all ways of showing our love. And that grows as we grow. It grows more wide. And then the path of wisdom. Wisdom you get by questioning, with curiosity. naturally you get questions, and then when you are allowed to ask questions, if not there, you start seeking. So that's what I do. I keep reading, keep listening to talks, and I come here to expand. And as I was saying the other day, this serves as a catalyst. You know, this community serves as a catalyst to strengthen my belief, whatever I have. You know, it's always possible to find something wrong with one system, and you can walk away from that. But if you go deeper, there is good in everything. So this questioning and then trying to get various viewpoints, you get to know what is the real truth behind. And that's what I'm seeking. I'm like, I think the story is called Siddhartha. I don't remember the name. I don't know the author. It's a famous story where this one guy keeps seeking and seeking and seeking, but then he ultimately finds one Govinda who's already realized. So I am a traveler in the spiritual path, and I'm going with others. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And it's a very good setup. It encourages and it keeps me pursuing my search. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like that.
And actually, yes. Thank you, Mutu. And actually, you raised the Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is such, when I talk about wisdom traditions, one of the sources of wisdom that I treasure is that book, is that series of verses. If you have not had the chance to read the Bhagavad Gita, it's just beautiful, and it's insightful, and it's inspiring, and it's instructive, and it just says exactly that. If you do your duty and you release the outcome, and you are devoted to finding the holy, you will come to truth in the end. And that's what the Rig Veda says. All the truth, they all lead to me. And they do whatever path you follow, they all lead to me. If you are following the path to the holy. And how do we know that? Well, there are wisdom traditions that say if a path leads you to be more compassionate and more kind and more loving, that is a holy path. If it leads you to be unkind and venal and greedy and self-centered, it is not. It's such a simple way to look at it. But anyway, thank you for this discussion. I do like our last Sunday of the month discussions. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.